since you are both my reps, I'm very excited. So we have started the Facebook live stream, and I want to, my name is Shannon Andreessen. I am a member of the Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition, and I am excited to welcome everyone to the Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition Virtual Candidate Forum for 2022. Thank you both for joining us on a busy Saturday in the middle of campaign season. I know you have a lot going on. We appreciate your time and are very pleased to welcome candidates Steve Swedzinski and Lori Pryor to our forum. Please note that District 49 candidate Marla Helseth could not attend the forum and did not accept our offer to send a proxy in her place to speak with constituents. District 49A candidate Ryan Chase, who is running for the House seat, could not attend the forum and was not able to send a proxy to speak to constituents. So welcome again, Senator Swedzinski, who represents District 49 at the Minnesota Senate, and Lori Pryor, who represents District 49A at the Minnesota House of Representatives. We're going to go ahead and get started with just a brief introduction about the LAC and why we host this forum every 2 years for our families in the district. We are a organization that's set up by the Hopkins School Board to advocate on behalf for public education. It is a nonpartisan advocacy group that works with school board members, parents, also students and community members who want to speak directly to our representatives at the state legislature to make all of the things that we want to see happen in our community around public education happen. And we are excited every year to partner with legislators that we know well, and also ones who have recently joined and are open and willing to partner with us to advocate for Minnesota families. So as some of you may be aware, the map of the Hopkins School District is a little bit of a funny shape, sometimes not expected, but it is a very diverse district, and therefore we have a lot of elected officials who represent us at the state legislature. And with recent redistricting, Hopkins Public Schools District has some new legislative boundaries and district numbers. We will now have 4 state senators and 6 state representatives representing our families, our school district families at the Capitol. So today's candidate forum has 4 separate sessions organized around the Senate district. And this district is Senate District 49. All sessions will be available for later viewing on our YouTube channel and Facebook page so that everyone can join in and know where our those candidates who wish to represent you at the state legislature, where they fall on issues pertaining to education. So this is our last session for the day. So if you're viewing it live, you can comment and give us some questions to ask. Otherwise, you can view the recorded sessions from earlier today on YouTube or Facebook Live. So we have some guidelines for constituent questions. The LAC does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not of the LAC or Hopkins Public Schools. And the purpose of this forum is to offer an opportunity for voters to hear the candidates discuss important education issues that will affect students and families in our school district and across the state. Questions have been submitted via our email, and any that were unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. And questions that are similar may be combined and summarized. Questions can be submitted live via chat during our Facebook event, and the moderator will treat them as stated above. And only questions related to education will be entertained by the moderator and asked in this forum. And now we can move on to guidelines for our candidates who have been very patient while I go through these. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and 1 minute for a concluding statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer questions presented by the moderator, and the timekeeper will present a running timer to keep track of that 2-minute countdown for each candidate. The moderator reserves the right to utilize the mute feature of Zoom if a candidate exceeds the time allotment, and the candidates will be selected in a randomized order to answer the presented questions. Obviously, today we have 2 candidates, so I believe that we can alternate who responds. And with all that information shared with our public and our candidates here today, I would like to introduce each candidate, open up the Zoom meeting for each candidate to introduce themselves and present their opening statement. We will go in alphabetical order. So Senator Steve Swedzinski, if you would like to start off.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction. I grew up in Superior, Wisconsin. I came down here when I was 19 years old to attend the University of Minnesota. I was the first member of my family to graduate from college. It was at the U that I met my wife, Patty. We ended up having 2 wonderful kids, Erica and John. And then when I was 25 years old, I began my teaching career at Eden Prairie High School, where I taught American government and American history, teaching my students the importance of civic engagement and political efficacy and civic virtue and the common good were all the center themes of my curriculum. In 2017, after 33 years of teaching, I began putting those very values that I taught my students into practice as your state senator, where I've been proudly sitting on the education committee at the Minnesota Senate for the last 6 years. There's only one duty, and I know this is going to come up in the questions, but there's only one duty in the Minnesota State Constitution with respect to the legislature, and it's Article 13, and I do believe we're going to get a question about this, but I just want to bring it up in my opening remarks that it is the duty of the legislature, a Republican form of government dependent upon the intelligence of the people. It is the duty of the legislature to create a general and uniform system of government. So the framers of the state constitution 150 years ago knew what it would take to have a thriving democracy within Minnesota. And outside the Senate chambers, I walk by these words every single day. And the words are engraved in stone. Next to freedom and justice is public education, without which neither freedom or justice can be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will hear from Lori Pryor.
Well, thank you, organizers of the forum. Thanks for being here all day long, I imagine, engaging in this incredibly important activity, which is putting out information so that constituents, voters can know who the candidates are. One of the things that probably the major thing that state government does is fund education. It's the biggest part of our budget with healthcare. So this is, of all the forums that we attend, I think this one is most specific to what our job is, which is to engage with people in our districts about this important topic of education. So my story a little bit, I'm going to take it back one more generation than Steve did and talk about my parents. We lived in the Chicago area, and my dad was looking at jobs across the country because he had just gotten an MBA degree. He's an accountant. And we went to Rhode Island near the ocean. It was beautiful. We went to Tennessee near the mountains, Blue Ridge Mountains. It was beautiful. We visited Austin, Minnesota. There's no mountains. There's no lakes in Austin, Minnesota. It's cornfields and it's flat. But when we visited there, my parents were very much impressed with public education in Austin, Minnesota. There was 4 kids. They said, this is the place for us. And they were drawn by public education. When my husband and I were he was finishing a residency in Virginia. And again, we had any place to live across the country. And we came back to Minnesota. We came back to the Hopkins School District because we value public education. So thanks for the forum today. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Representative Pryor. I would now like to turn over, we're shifting into the question portion of our forum today, and I would like to turn that over to 2 of our students who serve on the Legislative Action Coalition. Oscar and Kira, if you would like to take it away.
Thank you. I'm Oscar Wolf. I'm a senior at Hopkins. I am a student board representative, and I also serve on the Legislative Action Coalition.
My name is Kira Shones, and I am also a senior at Hopkins. I also serve on the LAC here, as well as I'm a leader of multiple student-based advocacy groups within the high school.
For our first question, in recent years, numerous proposals have been made in the legislature to provide public funding for private and religious schools, either directly through vouchers or indirectly through tax credits, tax sheltered accounts, or by routing tuition through tax-exempt organizations. What is your position on providing public funding for non-public schools? Please explain your reasoning. And I think we'll just go in the opposite order we did opening statements. So Ms. Pryor.
All right, thank you for the question. A little bit of background on this. I heard in my first session in 2017, one of the bills that you just described. So it was creating these tax credits that people could use to donate to foundations that were then used to fund private schools. And what they were saying is that, oh, this is the way to close the achievement gap. This was the silver bullet that was going to fix all our problems. But what it did was it diverted large amount of public dollars to private schools without the accountability and transparency about how that money is going to be spent. So it was and without any data to say that it actually would help the achievement gaps and opportunity gaps that we have in Minnesota. So without any data that said, yep, this is going to be a good idea. This is worth our public dollars to go to this activity, this funding source, and knowing how costly it was. I thought it was a poor proposal when it was presented then, and we heard it in committee. I continue to think that it's a poor idea. Essentially, what we're doing is we're defunding public education. We're diverting dollars that we so desperately need to fund our public schools and putting it into private schools without accountability, without transparency. And, I don't think that's the way forward for Minnesota.
Thank you. Mr. Swedzinski.
Oh, Steve.
Thanks for that question, Oscar. I remember what Lori was just alluding to, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the education committee kept emphasizing this isn't taking money out of education, those scholarship programs. It's taking money out of the general fund. And it was interesting, it seemed like they couldn't wrap their heads around that 42% of the general fund goes to E12, and that they couldn't figure that out. Just, I found so perplexing. So, but there's three reasons why I would never support a voucher program here in Minnesota. And the first reason I alluded to is it would reduce state revenues. And because of the $52 billion spending bill a couple of years ago, 42% went to the to states, the public E12. It would take money away from that. I think there's a constitutional issue here. The state constitution does have a clause right after the uniform and general and uniform system of public schools clause that says no public money, no public funds can go for, and it specifically mentions Christian and other non-secular schools. And the third reason I'm opposed to what we would call vouchers is private schools don't have the same responsibilities that public schools do with respect to things like special education programs. The pedagogical education of their teaching staff isn't at the level of the same level as it is for public schools. Discipline issues, the robust curriculum of our public schools isn't a requirement in our private schools. So for those three reasons, I'm very adamantly opposed to any voucher programs, no matter what semantics we hide behind.
Thank you. Our next question is, if elected, your oath to uphold the Minnesota State Constitution includes the education clause as mentioned in Article 13, Section 1, which reads in part, the legislature shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise as will secure a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state. Given the fact that the state currently has a record high surplus, and given the fact that education spending is $925 per pupil, behind where it was in 2003 as adjusted for inflation. Describe your education spending priorities and or your plan to secure sound funding for Minnesota public schools.
Yeah, again, a great question. The $9 billion surplus, it seemed to me that the perfect compromise, everybody goes home getting something, was a third set aside for a rainy day fund, a third set aside for return to the taxpayers, and then a third specifically going to education. So there'd be a $3 billion, a third of the surplus. And the two things that I would propose one of them I actually wrote a bill on, and the first part would be that we would get rid of the cross subsidy. And that would be about, I think, $1 billion to try to get rid of the cross subsidy. And I think maybe that'll come up later. But more importantly, the bill that I introduced called for funding levels return to our best year in my teaching career was 2003, where we funded education in every way, shape, or form that most people in the state of Minnesota were confident. Well, we never kept up with that, those funding levels, and every year since, we just never funded at the rate of inflation. So that the other part of that $3 billion, my bill proposed is we would bring the 2003 funding levels to 2022, accounting for inflation, and the budget from there on out would be every year indexed for inflation. It'd be automatic, so that every April and May schools aren't giving all these pink slips to teachers because they don't know what the funding is going to look like from the state legislature. And so it would take care of a lot of issues that our school districts face every in the spring of every year. And so that would be my proposal for the 1/3 of the $9 billion surplus.
Thank you. Ms. Pryor?
All right, thank you. So I agree with what Steve just said.
I'm finding, sorry, Lord, don't take this out of her time. I'm finding that we're doing this back and forth. Sorry.
Yep. So I'm gonna agree with everything that Steve just said, and now I don't have to add it to my time because he already said it. But let me just say, you know, in addition to increasing the formula, and so we get back to where we should be based on the numbers in 2003, which was probably it was pretty good funding back then. Maybe we still need more, but at least that's something to shoot for. Making sure that we're funding special education. Also, I want to add a couple more funding areas though that we need for public education, because with the formula, it's all schools get the same, which is that increased formula, and all schools do need that. But we know that different schools have different needs. Some schools have an issue, more of an issue with the special education cross subsidy. There's other schools that have issues with English language learners, and there's a cross subsidies there too. We also know that we are desperately short on support staff across the state in schools. So we need to increase the number of support staff that we have, paras and other educational support staff, including bus drivers. Also, we need more school counselors. We also need more mental health in our schools. And we need to recruit and retain more teachers of color. And also we need early childhood. And so there's some other funding priorities that I would like to add to the general idea of adding money to the formula and reducing the cross subsidy.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Our next question. The research is clear. Children who are fed while at school do better academically and socially. Despite knowing this, we still require families to pay for the food students consume while at school. Bills have been proposed at the federal level, and 4 other states have passed laws fully funding school nutrition departments. How would you address this issue and the funding crisis looming for school districts across the state? Ms. Pryor?
Well, I could have added universal school lunches and school meals to the funding priorities on the list that I just came up with, that I just introduced before, because this is another part. So this should not be an or, that we increase the formula, reduce the cross subsidies and the other issues and priorities that I mentioned before. This is another and. It needs to be funded at the state level, and it needs to be universal across the state, and for the reasons that the question already proposes. This is proven. Basically, we have the data that says this makes a difference to education and to children's ability to succeed in school. We know that we meet basic needs when kids are at school. We take that on as a public responsibility of meeting a child's needs when they're in the classroom, when it's part of their education day. And having nutritious meals is part of the needs that we need to meet. So I do support this and have it as another funding priority for our state government.
Thank you. Mr. Swedzinski?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Boy, you know, that when you see as a teacher, and I haven't seen these in years because we in Eden Prairie got rid of lunch shaming years ago, but when you see that stamp on the kid's hand and for the rest of the school day, you know, I mean, it was horrible that kid would have to, you know, in their 3rd and 4th hour class would have that stamp on the whatever this is called, part of their hand. And so one of the most disturbing statistics I know, so I'm opposed to lunch shaming, and so, but one of the things, getting back to the question, that a very disturbing statistic to me is that 71% of 18 to 25-year-olds are not qualified to serve in the U.S. military. And 2 of the reasons, there's 3 main reasons. One is no high school diploma. 2 is a felony on their record, but and the 3rd one is obesity. And one of the things we could be doing a lot better job of with respect to food insecurity and poor health. And we know that schools teach lifetime habits. And if we can teach kids to eat a more responsible, balanced diet of vegetables and fruit in high school, that their academic related things will just start spiraling, and they'll start doing better in school because they're not hungry and they're getting better diets. And maybe this is a hidden gem of an issue that we can use to get rid of the achievement gap and the opportunity gap or the vulnerability gap, because universal free meal programs really do, in my opinion, not just get rid of the shaming of not paying up, but also promotes academic achievement. And so anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from staff. What is your position on the proposed legislation to raise wages of non-licensed school staff to $25 an hour? What would you do to get this legislation passed? Or what other alternatives would you offer to ensure our school support staff are provided a living wage and other benefits? Mr. Swedzinski?
Okay, it's hard to keep up. Okay, first of all, the first thing we need to start doing is stop calling them support staff and calling them the critical staff that they do, because that support staff implies that they're underlings of the teachers, and they're not underlings. They provide the critical elements of the kids' school day, so that when they walk into a teacher's classroom, they're fed, they're properly driven to the school, they don't supervision, the security personnel, all those so-called support staff, which I would again call critical staff, provide a critical role in our schools. But anyways, we can't find school bus drivers, we can't find lunch room clerks, we can't find security workers because we're not paying them enough. And then all of a sudden we let them go in June without them being able to qualify for unemployment insurance. It's a tragedy. We need to start treating them with the respect and admiration that they deserve, because they're the ones that are making those kids safe and fed and have a fun drive to school that they feel safe on. And so what can we do? If we do get the control of the Senate, because I'm surprised I haven't heard Lori yet say we did this and this and this in the House, but in the Senate, if we can get control of the Senate, I'm pretty confident we're going to have hearings on how we can give a livable wage, so that every person walking into our E12 education schools feels like they're a valued asset and a valued participant in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pryor?
All right. So I know this is an excellent question, and I'm glad that the LAC decided to bring this one forward. During the session, I was meeting with a lot of educators from across the state, and one issue that we kept hearing over and over again was the wages of the critical staff that Senator Swedzinski was just talking about. They're not the licensed teachers, but the other staff in the school that are critical to a child's safety, to their education, to their well-being. So they're not the other people that you can just bring in, but they are also professionals. They are also essential to the work that it takes to provide a quality education to every child in Minnesota. Businesses are talking about the workforce shortages. There is a workforce shortage, but one of the areas where it's most critical, this workforce shortage, is in our schools. We cannot hire people at low wages. We have to pay fair wages for people to take these jobs, for people to continue on these jobs. And an experienced professional, an experienced staff member is so valuable to a child's education that we cannot just say, well, we'll just bring in more people from someplace else. They're not there. They're not coming. They're going to work at Target because they get better wages and better benefits and more respect in many ways. So let's do the right thing for everybody that works in our schools, for everybody that takes care of our kids and provides their education.
Thank you. Schools have changed how they deliver education, but not how they assess students. What are your thoughts on changing how they measure student success? Ms. Pryor?
So this is an interesting question, and it's one I think that we grapple with, but it's actually one that we probably have not given enough thought to. It's kind of like we're on automatic right now. We've got these tests, and we just keep using all of these resources to continue to deliver them, even when we know that they have glaring shortcomings in actually helping students achieve and even helping us assess how our educational systems are doing it. So I can tell you right now, I don't have a clear answer on how we can improve this right now. But what I can say is that I think it is an issue, and I think it is something where we need to, come to the table and have discussions about how to improve these assessment tools that we're using in our schools right now, and probably allow for more flexibility while maintaining accountability for our schools and for our education systems.
Thank you. Mr. Swedzinski?
Yeah, one of my mantras in my 33 years of teaching was don't let school get in the way of your education, because I believe there's a lot of other ways to educate and evaluate kids than just doing a test. I once had a student that had gray hair right here, and I thought at first it was genetic or something. And then I found out he broke the state record for number of AP tests. And I can't help but think the stress and anxiety of all those AP exams might have brought on a little bit of premature gray. I was speaking to a class of students at Wayzata High School a couple years ago, and maybe about 120 students were in this amphitheater, and they were great during the day, so what do you think of this or that? And they'd nod when I answered, or just politely agree or disagree. But finally, a young woman, she said, what's your position on standardized testing? And I said, I think we're testing you kids to death. And I got an applause. It was only applause I got all day. And I agree with Lori. We've got to figure, neither of us have probably given this a great deal of thought, but when as part of my government class at the high school, I tried to have them do more real world experiences. And two of the things they had to do for what I called the portfolio was they had to attend a civic meeting, and granted, these were juniors and seniors, so they all had driver's licenses. They had to go to the state capitol, and I had a tour that they had to fill out when they were there. And so I just believe we've got to, there's ideas out there that if we start planting these seeds, especially in our students' heads, of alternative ways that we can measure achievement and progress, let's start looking at those ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is, in what ways can the legislature help schools diversify their teaching workforce? Mr. Swedzinski?
Yeah.
We're going to be switching computers. This one's about to crash. We'll be back in a sec.
Okay. Do I start answering now?
Go for it.
Okay. 2 years ago, well, as I'm not telling you anything you guys don't know, but about 4% to 6% of our teachers are in Minnesota are teachers of color, and anywhere, depending on what school district is, 40 to 60% of our young students are students of color. Clearly, study after study says if I have a teacher that looks like me, I may do better in school. And I believe that. I believe that if a 7th grade student of color or a 9th grade student of color was maybe thinking about a career in education, and yet they never had a teacher that looked like them, they would dismiss that goal of maybe becoming a teacher. So 2 years ago, in this last session, but at the beginning of it, I had one goal in mind, and it was how can we get more teachers of color into our classrooms? And through a myriad of different programs in the Senate and the House, and grants and ideas, we ended up getting $16 million specifically for teachers of color programs, and programs like Grow Your Own. If all of a sudden a para in a building is an adult of color, and they really seem, they always get compliments. God, you really seem to do well with children. Do you know that there's this idea called Grow Your Own, and it's a program for people like you that we want to support you in maybe your career in education. And the other program that I know of some schools are adopting is having a class specifically for kids that are entertaining and a career in education. And so it's just another idea of trying to get more teachers of color into our schools.
Thank you. Ms. Pryor?
All right, again, all the things that Steve just said, and I'll try to maybe repeat some of that and add some few other details. But we did, it was actually back in 2018, or I think it was 2018, maybe 20, no, I think it was 2018. There was a great initiative, and it was very well thought out, and it was looking at all the places that we could do something to increase the number of teachers. And it began with, as Steve just alluded to, even in high school, students that might consider a career in teaching, to help them, maybe experience a teacher, be a teacher aide, something like that, but to help them picture themselves as a teacher, because probably they didn't see anybody that looked like them. So even to say, I could be a teacher, when even though nobody that I know, I've never had a teacher that looked like me. So it's like making that transition and saying, yep, it could be me. We also had funding for scholarship programs, so that if you didn't come from a family with a lot of money, that you could afford to get that 4-year degree that you needed to be a teacher. There was money for that year of student teaching to make sure that you could be really qualified and well prepared to be a teacher. And then also to do loan forgiveness for different students that may have gotten that degree and they're trying to go into teaching, but it's not well paid compared to other professions. So to start giving loan forgiveness. So there's a lot of different aspects and a lot of parts to this that really would start moving the needle and recruiting and retaining this diversity of teachers that we need right now.
Thank you. We will now move on to our final question. Do you support allowing locally elected school boards to renew an existing operating referendum by a majority vote of the school board after a public hearing? Ms. Pryor?
Sure. I have actually on many occasions voted yes to doing that. So I will be consistent and say yes. I know that it would save the school districts all of that time of having to go out to renew referendums. And then the other part of it is that, when people make that vote, there would be the understanding that this is something that could be renewed. So yes, so I would vote for that again, if given the opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Swedzinski?
Yeah, yes. It's cost, I think, and Steve probably knows a better the actual number, but I think it's anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000 for a school district to run a referendum on a ballot, and that's a first year teacher salary. And so we're talking about a school teacher that could be in the kindergarten classroom, third grade classroom, that would be denied that job just so that they can run the referendum. So, and our school boards are elected officials. So if the locals don't like that referendum was renewed, in the next election, they can vote for candidates that say, vote for me, and I'll rescind the referendum if that's even legal. And so, but then lastly, I just want to say, it's as a side note, I find it deplorable that in a referendum, and I brought this up in class for my entire career and for 6 years in the Senate, when a school district runs a referendum, it specifically says, if you vote yes, this will increase your taxes. And it doesn't say, and if you vote no, your class sizes will go up. And if you vote yes, your tax will go up. But if you vote no, your class size will go up. You're going to have teacher layoffs. You might have to increase the walk to the high school from 1 mile to 2 miles. All these things that might happen if you vote no. And I just think that we either A, need to take that if you vote yes, your taxes will go up, because it's unfair question to only give one side of the story, or you add both sides of the story to that referendum question so that the voter has a fair analysis of the two sides of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that was our final question.
Oh, thank you very much. I just want to offer the candidates an opportunity to present their closing statements. Since Senator Swedzinski, you just spoke, we'd like to invite Representative Pryor to give your closing statement. You have 1 minute.
All right. So again, thank you for hosting this forum. I hope, and thank you for the people that might be watching live or watching sometime in the future. These are important topics that we've been talking about. And really, it is about what's happening today in our state, but it's really also about the future of our state, because we're talking about education. It's about our economy. It's about our civic responsibility. It's about, everything that, so many things that really mean this is what it is to be a Minnesotan, and this is why we live here. So I'm hoping that people do pay attention to this issue of education. It is the function of state government to fund and to support education. And I know as a state representative, that's been my priority and will continue to be my priority. I'm running for House District 49A, and I hope that I can earn your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. And Senator Swedzinski, your closing statement.
I just want to thank everybody listening in, and for the LAC, the Hopkins LAC, for putting this on. You guys were one of the first groups that reached out to me after I got elected 6 years ago, and we've had a good working relationship ever since. And I just want to give a shout out to my colleague, Lori Pryor, who is an amazing advocate for public schools. If you ever come visit me at the state Senate, you're going to walk under the Senate chamber and you're going to see this huge mural above the door. And it's called the Sacred Torch or the Eternal Flame, something like that. And it's an allegorical painting. It shows an elderly person huddled around a campfire. And I think the campfire is symbolic of all the knowledge and wisdom that humanity has come up with over the ages. And she has just hired a torch to a middle-aged person, somebody similar to like Lori or I. And this middle-aged person is handing the torch to a young person. And that's the job of the legislature and the LAC, in fact, is to make sure that that torch we're handing the two students on this Zoom call a bright and wonderful future, that they're prepared to be productive citizens and great parents and healthy individuals leading wonderful lives, and hopefully on their way to leaving this world a better place than they found it.
Thank you so much. The Hopkins LAC would like to thank you for your time today and your interest in education issues. On behalf of all the LAC members, along with your constituents, we enjoy learning more about your priorities for education funding and policies that will affect the future of all Minnesotans. So we appreciate your candidacy and wish you the best of luck in the November 8th elections.
Thank you.
This ends our 2022 candidate forum. And we look forward to a robust campaign season leading up to a huge voter turnout leading up to and on election day. Thank you all.